Hey guys, welcome to episode 37 of Better Body Radio. And today is going to be our first guest episode in quite a number of weeks. And today we are joined by Andrew Coates, who is a personal trainer based at Evolve Strength in Alberta, Canada. He's a regular contributor to well-known online publications such as T Nation and industry-leading app TrueCoach. Andrew has also got his own podcast. It's called the Live Free and Diet Hard podcast. With over 16,000 coaching hours clocked to date, Andrew's clientele range in age, gender, and the goals they are looking to attain. In particular, he works primarily with the general population, as well as young athletes on building their strength and habits that they will need to improve performance and the ability to successfully navigate life. In today's episode, I ask Andrew what his biggest challenges and successes have been as a coach to date so far, how he got into writing for the likes of T Nation and TrueCoach, and what he's doing to kind of almost assist or somewhat motivate fellow fitness professionals with building their confidence and reach within the industry. This was a fantastic chat, really enjoyable. Andrew, as most Canadians are, super nice guy. He's got such a wealth of experience, knowledge, been in the industry for roughly the same amount of time. But he's also built a fantastic network for himself and really rubbed shoulders with some of the leading professionals in the industry. So he's got a lot of perspective, a lot of insight, and he's got a very critically thinking mind, which definitely resonates with how I try to view things within our space, where often there's a lot of sound bites, but not a lot of introspection and a lot of really critical thinking and wider lens type approach to what it is we do. So without further ado, enjoy the episode, grab a coffee, kick back, or if you're listening to this on your regular commute, hope you enjoy this over a few journeys, and we'll see you in the next episode. Yeah, Andrew, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's funny how the people like to be very critical of social media, and how, I like to often call it anti-social media. But one of the really cool things that allows us to do is it allows us to connect with people we literally would never have otherwise met. And it was quite cool that you reached out on Instagram via voice note, because to be honest, I don't know, not many people are doing that. Just out of interest, what made you want to reach out to people that were kind of following you?
Well, I know that, maybe it comes a little bit from Jonathan Goodman, who I know actually send video messages. And if you get a John Goodman video message, if you know who John is, and if you're following the Personal Trainer Development Center or the Online Trainer Academy, John's a great guy. John's an industry friend. He's been someone who's been good to me for a while. And you get one of those video messages and you're like, oh man, like that makes you feel special. So somewhere along the way, and I think it's too about interacting with your followers and engagement on social media, but something that kind of comes naturally. Somewhere I kind of got this idea of, okay, just send a voice message instead of just typing one, because I had a guy who he had like 11,000 followers. He's in India, and I sent him a message like, hey man, thanks for following, blah, blah, blah. He's like, is this an autoresponder? And I'm like, fuck no. Jesus, no. Anyway, but then the human voice can create a faster, more efficient, as I realized, and much more personalized, interaction with someone than just a, hey, thanks for following me, right? Which I think for some people, okay, cool. But for some people, they're just going to straight up ignore that and think it's an automatic response. So, and the response I've gotten to it from people has been just straight up wows in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And it's sort of weird because I've been, writing for T Nation now for 2 years almost. And, I've had the podcast for 3. I've been in the industry for 10, and no one outside of like the word of mouth community in Edmonton, Alberta, knew who I was in the industry for at least the first 7, right?
Yeah.
So that's starting to change due to the places that I know I'm popping up in the industry. And I've started accumulating a much larger Instagram following. It's not massive yet, but it's been growing really rapidly this year. So I'm getting the kind of engagement where people are, pretty like wowed that fact, oh my God, you reached out to them. So I've actually enjoyed that engagement, but it's, I guess, a nice little way to cement someone who goes from just being like a random follower who might like one of your things once in a while into an actual, and this sounds weird, but a fan. And I've noticed that it's still super surreal. It's weird, but you get people who are engaged to the point where they love what you're doing, that they're actually fans. I've also had people who've found me in gyms in person and walked up and be like, hey, I read your stuff on T Nation, or hey, I follow you on social media, and they start asking me questions. It's rare, but it still happens. And it's just like, what the fuck is going on here? But why put the effort into Instagram if you want to grow a social media following? Any book or anybody who really knows this stuff will tell you you can't just post and ghost. You have to get into the comments. You have to be engaged with what's going on. If someone takes the time to respond to you, I mean, God, you've got someone who took the time to reply to something you posted, who took their time to follow you in the first place and is interested in what you have to say. And meanwhile, you're someone who has cool shit to say and wants followers, wants to, reach more people and potentially, reach more clients. My God, how simple is that to send a quick voice message to someone at work or to respond in a comment? And if it isn't common sense to you to respond, then why are you even there? You're in the wrong place in the first place in our industry.
Yeah, it's definitely a very human thing to do. And definitely for me, I'll be honest with you, when you said about often people typing responses, I'll be honest, most of the time if I get followed by someone who has like a pretty decent following, the first thing I'm thinking is how long is it till I receive a private message that's saying, hey, how's it going? It'd be cool if you wanted to come onto our free Facebook group to check out our business, blah, blah. And the thing is, see now is, especially if you've been around for a long time, you're almost just kind of expecting that. Whereas I get a voice note from you and I know that you're based in Canada. It's that thick Canadian accent. I'm like, well, there's no mistake in that. He's taken his time to send that message directly. So
the man is telling me about a thick accent. I love it. That's fantastic.
I know that's a rich coming from a Scotsman. But in fairness, since I've been in Dubai, the accent has really kind of neutralized to a degree.
Really neutralized. Okay, I'll take your word for that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Everybody listen. Oh my God, what did it start out sounding like? So
gibberish, absolute gibberish, most likely.
Oh, I love it. I mean, Scottish accents. I find actually it depends on where someone's from. I find that Kiwi Aussie accents I'm very hit or miss with. I'm originally from Newfoundland, so the eastern coast of Canada, which is notorious for a very thick accent, a very unique one. And I hate the Newfie accent. Sorry, Newfies, if any of you guys are listening, I can't stand the accent, but I've never had one myself growing up there.
There you go. But I suppose, it's like anyone who's not from where you're from has an accent. That's kind of the way we view things, right?
And that's also true. And it's sort of this, I like the term ethnocentric way of looking at the world when, oh, we're the ones who sound normal, but everybody else sounds different, right? It's the same sort of thing that, we just assume that the world is the way that the culture we grew up in is. And so you have people with different values and different ideas and different ways of life. Wow, that's exotic and weird. Well, you're just as exotic and weird to them as they are.
Definitely. All about perspective.
Americans.
Well, yeah, there you go.
Perspective.
Let's dive into question one and get the show on the road. So for those that may not have came across your work, can you give the listeners just a little bit of background on how you got into the industry, as well as just sharing a little bit of your backstory to date?
If anyone, I'm a big book reader, so I like sometimes speaking in terms of books. If anyone's read the book So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport, it's an exploration of not to follow your passion, but to find passion within, the work that you're doing. I started as a trainer 10 years ago. I'm 42, so that when people kind of do the math, they're like, hey, you started at 32 years of age. I have a Bachelor of Commerce degree from Memorial University in Newfoundland. Personal training was not my ambition at the time. It wasn't something I would even imagine coming out of university. And I was athletic in school all the way up through as a kid into high school. And then I dabbled in weight training, high school, and a little bit in university. And I got very serious about it at age 24. So that was something that was a big part of my life for a long time. There was a little disruption in the middle there. I owned a nightclub. I've worked as a casino poker dealer and a manager when I first moved to Edmonton when I was 28. I worked for the bank. Didn't like the suit and tie, traditional sales thing at all. Hated that stuff. And I was working out at the gym I was a member at, and one of the trainers there kept bugging me to come work for them. I'm like, nah, I'm not interested in that. And I remember thinking, as a personal trainer, you need to know how to sell more than you need to even know how to train, right? That was sort of my attitude back then. But I wasn't enjoying the job I was doing in the casino, so I said, all right, fine, I'll give it a shot. So, and today on Facebook, I just saw my 10-year, 10-year ago memory about saying, I'm finding this job challenging. but it's interesting. And like, I can see a lot of potential. And I look back at that and going, oh, wow, okay. Yeah, I had no idea kind of where this was going to take me. And
Mm.
at first it was a job and could never have foreseen some of the cool stuff that's happened. I found that the gym that I worked at was pretty good at filling you up full of clients. So that part sort of took care of itself early on. Then I was good at renewing them and I was generating referrals. So that stuff took hold early and then was just stable. And I
Mm.
got really busy and I stayed really busy because I had this idea that the level of busy that I achieved was what an average trainer did. Turns out I was the one doing the most sessions in the entire company. So, which, but once you establish that as kind of normal, then that becomes your normal and you run with it. But over time, I started to dive deeper and deeper into as much education as I possibly could find on training. I was more and more interested. Even from the early days, I was reading T Nation every morning. It's kind of one of my, educational things, whatever articles that, we talked off air about what Eric Cressy or Tony Gentilcore or Dean Somerset have, you know, written that particular, day. And as it turns out, the company I worked for, Dean Somerset worked for that company here in Edmonton as
Mm.
well. So, it kind of came along him and his continuing education courses very early on, which was very critical because he became an important role model for me and an important part of my early education and stuff, and still to this day. We're even partners in a conference here in Edmonton that we do annually. We had to cancel this year, but we'll bring it back hopefully in 2021. So anyway, just along the way, I developed a passion for it, sort of like the book describes, and I truly love what I get to do. I eat, sleep, and breathe it. My girlfriend would probably complain that I spend too much time on it, but that's been a full-time coaching load, a little bit of online coaching. I don't do a ton of online training, but I have a small business on the side of it. There is the podcast you mentioned. I'm trying to write articles for T Nation and True Coach, and maintain, especially this year, a very active and try to grow a social media reach and audience. And there's a purpose behind that too, which I know you want to ask about after. So, but that's kind of where that all came from.
Cool. So there's so many things I could kind of potentially pry and dig out of that, but some of the questions I've got later will kind of get to that stuff. So we'll get there. We'll get there.
Sure.
So I'm gonna hit you with a two-part question now. So these are questions that I know many of the coaches who listen to this podcast will probably resonate with. So what have been some of your biggest challenges that you've faced in your career to this point? And then conversely, what have been some of your most notable successes as a coach?
It's funny with the challenges, I sort of think back and realize that it feels like, especially the last few years, whatever I've touched or tried to put my effort into has actually gone fairly smoothly. I've actually found the online coaching not as, in terms of like doing the system wise, not as like, I don't love it as much as I love the in-person stuff, but I've grown to engage with the clients that I have and I see them really happy with it. So I love that part. But in terms of challenges, and some trainers might relate if they ever worked in commercial gym settings or still do, was if you love what you're doing, and if you love it, if you're listening to a podcast like this, my guess is you're really passionate about it. You probably look around and realize that you're a lot more passionate about a long-term successful career than probably many of your coworkers in a commercial gym. Okay.
Mm.
And then you have the employees who aren't the trainers who tend to, especially if you get the salespeople and the front desk people who have a lot of free time on their hands, they can create a lot of drama and a lot of trouble. And while I did have a few good managers in my time, I had a lot of bad managers. I had a lot of people who were selfish, were caught up in their own ends. In the club that I was in, there was a lot of aggressive multi-level marketing recruitment. And that stuff got to the point where it's very malicious and problematic towards anyone who's not a part of it. And then I actually had coworkers who, unfortunately, I did witness a lot of sexual harassment and totally unprofessional and immoral behavior in that environment to the point where eventually, because of the conflict, it pushed me out to the point where I just need to get out of this environment. Best thing to ever happen to me. I'm actually grateful for it. But I remember times where I'm getting written up for things I didn't do, bogus complaints, being harassed by coworkers. And I don't think this is everybody's experience. I'm also a strong, disagreeable personality where I don't tolerate um, you know, things being done to coworkers and just the environment is being a toxic environment. And I kind of hope that a lot of trainers would, if they're in a similar situation, they know that, it's not their livelihood at stake and they'll have, an exit strategy, because I developed one because I knew I would have to leave. But one of the biggest challenges was working in a space where not everybody shared my ethics, values, and goals. Thankfully, along the way, there were some people that did, and they've all turned out really good. And I still have great relationships with them to this day. And I try to help them along the way. But there were also a lot of people who were very self-interested, and again, just a total lack of any sort of integrity or honesty.
It's such an interesting point because I think almost like you said, any coach or any trainer who's been in a commercial facility at any time, I can't imagine there's one like decent or passionate or knowledgeable trainer who hasn't been in an environment they're in and thought these guys shouldn't even be allowed to coach people. These guys have don't have the knowledge, don't have the ethics, they don't care, they don't have systems. They walk around in basketball shorts and tank tops versus looking a little bit more sharp and professional, being really engaged with the clients. I mean, that goes on in the gym that I'm based in now, for example. And we have a small team, like there's myself, my wife, and two coaches. But we look around and there are a couple of good coaches in the gym. And naturally, who do we get on with best? We get on with those guys because there's a bit more of a synergy and we have a bit more of the same mindset. But then there's a lot of others in there that's just, I just wonder, like I like to call them expensive rent-a-friends. That's pretty much what they are. You rent a friend for an hour to have a conversation with, count your reps, and then see you next session. I think that's a big problem in the industry. We just have such a low barrier to entry. And I heard, Luke Leeman. I don't know if you're familiar with Luke Leeman of the Muscle Nerds or not.
He's
Uh,
well respected. I don't know his stuff very well, but I know he's very well respected.
yeah, I mean the guy's he's crazy intelligent, but he's also super funny. He's great to go on a podcast. I need to get him on at some point. But he was kind of talking about that. He's like the barrier to entry is so low that in the States they've even got certifications you can literally do a weekend and then you can start going and training people. I just think for as long as the barrier to entry is so low, I just don't see that's going to be a challenge that as trainers we're never going to be able to not come across.
So I have some thoughts there, and I feel like they're worth elaborating on.
Definitely.
Sometimes, and I know Nick Tubinello and Mike Israetel talked about this recently, the dangers of the call for greater regulation in our industry. So, yes, we know that we do have a lower barrier to entry. Part of my thoughts are there are advantages to that. I mean, yes, we as an industry want to raise the bar for everybody setting the example, but that's my attitude: is set a good example. You're passionate about being an educator in this space for the people who want to learn. Serve those people. It is our jobs as trainers to be marketable, skilled, to let people see it, be great at the media side of things, to compete for the eyeballs and the business of the people that are out there. You can't force the end consumer to not want the quick fix. And we will never be able to legislate or regulate out the coaches. Okay, let's say you create a barrier to entry. Well, we're going to come back to that because there's a major problem there, or a higher level of regulation. But how many people, online influencers, the way they'll use influencer with quotations in a bad way, are going to operate without certifications and be offering coaching plans anyway? You're not going to stamp that stuff out. So we better stop complaining about it, and we better start doing a really fucking good job of making those people just pale in comparison to the quality of what we're doing, and attract the people who are the low-hanging fruit who get picked off by these people. Now, let's talk about regulation. Well, then who decides on the regulations? Is it CrossFit? And I know you got a background in CrossFit. My idea that if CrossFit is a certifying body, and I respect CrossFit and I think it's doing a lot of wonderful things, but I would be horrified at the idea that CrossFit is somehow the body that has the greatest pull with whatever government body that turns around and legislates the regulation to where everybody has to do CrossFit style stuff. Or is it going to be NASM, or is it going to be some other governing body who has the greatest connections within government, wheels up enough money, and then they're the one who controls that? And do we end up in a situation where we are regulated to the point like physical therapists are, where or dietitians, where we have a very specific prescription, that narrow guidelines within which we can even operate, and restrict some of our ability to do what people like yourself, me, and the listeners here learn is the best way to operate with each individual client, because each individual client is very different. I don't want to end up following a script where you could get sued if you step off of it, or lose your licensure. So I think there are major pitfalls there. And personally, my attitude, like, again, complaining about people on social media who are sharing bad information of big followings, and share selfies or whatever. Well, first of all, a lot of them bought their followings, deceived. But two, I'm going to compete with those people. And I said this year, all right, I'm going to do that. I'm actually going to grow Instagram following. And I took it from under 3,000 to, as of time of recording, it's over 8,500. I'll hit 10,000 before Christmas. And I'm having fun with it. I'm enjoying it. And so it shows that you could actually do it. But I'm sharing information that I think is great, is evidence-based. People are liking it. And while I don't care about having 1 million, 2 million followers or anything of that nature, I do want to see if I can go out and grab the eyes and attention of people who need this.
Yeah, I think it's funny. That's not the first time that thought process has been discussed. Like I've discussed that with a number of people, and there are actually, like you said, inherent advantages to it not being regulated to a degree. And I like the way that Luke kind of described it, because he was talking about, he kind of elaborated on that point as well. And he kind of said, well, he's like, he ends up in a position because he knows a lot about biochemistry where doctors are so pigeonholed into, this is how I have to deal with this. And you can get people for years and years who just don't get the treatment they need or get the plan they need, but they go to someone like Luke, who is in quote unquote an unregulated industry, but he has the autonomy and the skill set to actually be able to give that person what they need. So I agree 100%. And I think the point I keep making to my team and to the guys that I'm speaking to are asking why you want to go into the education space more as well. You get two options, I guess. You can either be super passive about everything that's going on and just say, well, I'm just going to keep my head down, not say anything, just go on with my stuff. Or I can face this thing head on. I can compete with those guys and I can actually stand up and lead from the front and actually set a good damn example of what I think a professional should look like. So yeah, I completely agree. 100%.
Just a big example. One of my clients recently let me know that she's pregnant. So I asked her for, a signed form from the doctor to be able to continue just as a formality, right? I've worked with pregnant women before. And so her doctor turned around and told her she's not allowed to lift anything heavier than 10 pounds. Like literally. I'm like, holy sweet shit. And she knows better than she knows this is bullshit. And what I explained to her and she agreed with is the fact that this doctor is basically providing a parameter that covers his ass. It's not what's in her best interest, but measurably he can say, okay, well, don't go past this threshold, which means, she probably, in his eyes, she won't do anything that could probably lose the baby, which makes him liable. So, but he's not liable if she doesn't maintain her physical health. She's been lifting heavier than that and she's quite active, and which will probably lead to a smoother pregnancy, less overall, not so much less overall weight gain, but certainly an easier time on dropping the weight post-pregnancy.
Yeah.
Probably easier delivery and a level of health. But those things are things that are hard to measure and tie to what the physician has said about her activity level. So he's playing it safe. And that's sort of within the old guidelines, but it's not in her best interest or in her, for the betterment of her health and her child's health. Now, again, I'm not advocating go and tell your clients doctors are idiots and don't listen to their advice. But my client turned around pretty quickly and she's like, I know this is bullshit. And so she did her own research. And here's what you can do. Here's what, first trimester, blah, blah, blah. Third trimester, into the second trimester, third trimester, you gear it down a little bit. You don't push it much on third trimester. You keep stuff away from your abdomen and you don't lay down on your back. You elevate your right hip if you do. And she already knows that stuff. So I'm like, cool, okay. So I can do what I know works best. She's making those decisions on that. I'm not defying a doctor per se. And she's actually going to go and get a referral to a different doctor or specialist just to make sure that she's well taken care of. Problem solved. If we were boxed in a really hard, position with our work, then we might not be able to do some of the stuff. It's like dietitians and where they have to follow like these bullshit food guides you often see in different countries, right? But anyway, again, we've discussed this whole thing about regulation. It's definitely got pros too, but I think there's a lot of cons. And I think people should always be very wary in any walk of life. And again, this gets a bit ideological about inviting more regulation down on you, more restriction in how you can live your life and what you can do.
Well, just look at the world climate we're in with COVID at the moment.
Totally, right? I mean, we now have the World Health Organization saying, don't use lockdowns as a primary way to control this. What's going on? And I'm not an epidemiologist or a virologist, but this one's fairly easy. This shit is out of control. It's hard to control a virus, and the governments are getting pressure from people to do something. So it's interventionism. So what do? They do a lockdown. And while measurably the lockdown can probably save the lives of, some of the 85-year-olds who are vulnerable, the people who this is disproportionately killing. We now know the death rates with younger people, and someone listening might be offended by this, but hey, go and actually check out the data on this stuff. And yes, we know that there are heart stuff and other nasty outcomes of people who survive it. So it's not just about the death rate. But what's not being accounted for by these politicians, but the World Health Organization is starting to say this, is what about the loss of livelihood, the mental health, the pandemic of mental health issues we're going to deal with. In Alberta, where I am, we have had more suicides and opioid deaths, overdoses, than we've had deaths from COVID here. And we're starting to realize, wait a second, these lockdowns are actually brutal. There's a respect that I believe an epidemiologist here in Alberta who's come out and said that the lockdowns are going to cause 10 times the harm that the virus does. We're damned if we do and damned if we don't. But again, what are the governments doing? France and the UK right now, they're saying, nope, lock it back down because they don't have a better answer. But anyway, I didn't want to get too much on that stuff. So that's all I'm going to say there.
Well, I think we're on the same page. And I know that there's a lot of people speaking out now, like in the UK, like Phil Lerner and some of the more leading coaches there, because I'm just like, listen, guys, I don't think the governments fully understand what a leisure club or what a gym actually does for people beyond the aesthetics or the vanity-driven measures. It's a lot more about health and mental health, and it's an outlet for people. And so, yeah, we'll not go down that path, but I think anyone in the health and fitness space is just kind of looking saying, listen, we are an integral part of building resilience to this whole thing. So let us do our job.
Exactly. And quite frankly, our livelihoods are essential, and people's mental health is essential. So,
exactly. Mic drop, leave it at that.
A fucking liquor store, right? I like my scotch too, by the way.
Well, there you go. That's acceptable. It's good for your mental health. So you're a regular contributor to the infamous T Nation, which we know, and that's kind of, I suppose, the common thread that connected us in the end, so to speak, as well as writing for industry-leading coaching app TrueCoach, which was a really cool fact I didn't know about until I researched that up. So what got you into writing, and how did you go about obtaining these sort of opportunities to write for these type of established online businesses and articles?
Well, I think reading T Nation many, many years ago as a coach, I always thought this was the coolest thing ever. But I also thought that there were sort of two tiers of trainers. You imagine that there's the gym floor trainers, people like us, and then the people in the stratosphere of our industry who are established. Again, your Tony Gentilcourt, your Eric Cressey's, your John Berardi's, your Brett Contreras, Ben Bruno, go down the list, right? Nick Tuminello, Christian Tim, up there, lots more. And so anyway, as time went on in my career, I kind of put my head down and focused on training and learning and whatnot. It all boils down to getting there, all boils down to the relationships I've developed over time. The interest in writing, I guess I just found myself writing blog style on Facebook. I didn't have a website until about, again, year 7 of my career. I was really behind on that. But I liked the idea of writing articles. So getting the website was all about being able to start publishing articles, get that stuff out there and practice it. I've read books on writing, which I really love studying. And it was something I was just interested in because I thought, okay, well, I'll share the stuff. And I didn't know if a lot of people would read it. And I didn't have any grand ambition. I never set out saying, hey, I want to write for T Nation one day. I just early on, like, oh man, that would be like a pipe dream. That's never going to happen. Like, So on to traveling in the industry. I started going to fitness conferences. There's a Kansas City Fitness Summit. That's kind of a small but legendary event. And there's a few others that I had bouts around to. And I met early on in my travels, Mike Isertel. He actually came here to Alberta for a seminar. Ended up having dinner with him and his team. And every time they come back, I always sit down with him, so he's become a really good friend. But through my travels, I've gotten to know and become friends with a lot of really cool, interesting people. And along with it, a lot of T Nation writers. Then over 3 years ago, my friend Dean Guido, he turned around and asked me, hey, let's do a podcast together. I was a big fan of podcasts. I like that. So I said, sure, fuck it. We know some people in the industry. And through my travels, I connected with, my first trip, I met Mark Fisher and Pete Dupuis and Sophie Lee and Spencer Nadolski and Lou Schuler and, on and on. And, Nick Tuminello. So we started the podcast, that grew and grew. And very quickly, we started having some really big guests on the podcast. It started blowing up, getting a really big audience. And it's just something we kept doing. So through that, I could then connect with more and more people from the industry. And then by adding all these people to Facebook, which I was more active on Facebook at the time, you then come across other people. So one day I saw that Danny Sugart, one of the editors of T Nation, was in somebody's comments. I think it was one of the other writers. So I saw this and I sent her a friend request. I sent her a message. I said, "Hey, Danny, I've been reading your stuff for years. I love your stuff." And there was that. So we chatted a little bit, and I said to her, like, you know what, you know, I'd love to have you as a podcast guest. You'd be great. You'd be someone we want to chat with. So she was pretty stoked about that. And so I come back to her 2 weeks later. I'm like, hey, I could get you on right away. Would you want to come? She's like, yeah, I've been listening to your podcast. It's great. Oh, like, holy shit. Okay, cool. So have her on, awesome guest, get to chatting. And then, a few weeks pass and she comes back to me almost sheepishly. I keep telling the story. So I apologize if anyone who's is listening to this because they've heard me on other podcasts. She's sort of like, hey, would you consider, maybe writing for T Nation, if you're interested. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Jesus, that's a dream come true. So of course I said yes, and I put a hell of a lot of effort into polishing that first article. Got really deep into writing's one thing; it's editing that brings out great writing. So my editing process is a much longer one. And so they accepted, published the first article, and then ever since, if I send them something training related, they just straight up publish it. So I try to get them 1 to 2 a month if I can over the last couple of years. And it's something I think is prestigious. I've run into people who, you said infamous teenager. Right? Not everybody agrees with the trading philosophies there, or they'll argue, well, you guys said this in one article, you said the opposite in the next article. You're missing the nuance, and you're also getting two different writers. And I mean, some of this stuff's also opinion. So if anything, I think T Nation is a great place to go to read, to test your bullshit meter, to see, okay, what is really good quality factual information, which writers are the ones that resonate with you, and which is the stuff that you're like, okay, you know what, that doesn't align with what I do, or I don't think that's right. So, and it's not to say there's a lot of bad information on there either, but you know what, you kind of have to develop this bullshit filter to see what's good fitness information from what's bad fitness information. That's why you want to be an educator, is to combat all the bad fitness information, right? Some of it bubbles through, or at least it's not applicable to certain audiences. So, but it's been the relationships that I've had the good fortune of making along the way. And there's nothing sort of looking for, there's nothing tactical about those relationships outside of just authentically meeting people and connecting. I didn't imagine, I got to meet this person. I want them to be a podcast guest 2.5 years from now. Or, it wasn't calculated. It just sort of happened that way. And now you look back and you're like, holy shit, I wouldn't even want to try to replicate this path for fear of like fucking it all up along the way. It's just been a cool journey. But yeah, and then I just really loved writing, and then I needed an outlet for it because your career stuff doesn't really go on T Nation. That's technical training stuff. And my audience, and this will go to something you wanted to ask about, my audience is supposed to be the end fitness users. So I wasn't using my website for writing like training, educational stuff. So True Coach became a perfect outlet to write that, because I like writing about career success, because this industry has been really good to me. I've had a really cool career. The last 3 years have been absolutely insane, unimaginably cool. And I'm excited for the future. And I've grown a following on my Instagram, which, is based on a lot of trainers, a lot of coaches. My podcast is definitely geared towards that too. So that's another fun outlet. And so I want to share stuff that has worked for me. A lot of the stuff I'm sharing, I'm writing about, is quite literally things that I've worked through, things that, okay, this was a challenge, or this was a struggle, or this is something that I had to deal with. Cool. I want to document and share that, because I don't think I'm the only person who's dealt with that.
Yeah, I think it was Gary Vaynerchuk. That was kind of one of his big recommendations years ago, was don't create content, document. And I think, like you said, when you do, that's so authentic compared to, right, I'm just going to come up with whatever I think someone wants to hear. Sometimes if it's just closer to home, then it sticks a lot better.
Oh, totally. Some of the stuff I've written for T Nation is stuff that I've, found in my, training. First article I wrote was about a seated overhead press. And I've got some restriction in my left shoulder, so I can't do a standing overhead press without getting into kind of a painful or modified range of motion, or hyperextending my back. And quite frankly, a lot of big guys and a lot of people just can't get fully overhead. And number one, deal with that directly through, a good physical therapist, or, good mobility work. But two, okay, maybe modify a bit. I put a bench angle at 80 to 85 degrees. I've got back support versus trying to stand in that position and arch your lower back. So sit in the bench, do it out of a rack, strict as hell. And then it's like, wait a second, this isn't out there in the training lexicon. It's kind of a simple concept, but I broke it down, did a video for it. They loved it and it did well. And so some of the other stuff I've modified over the years. I mean, I wrote an article. It's this simple. You know, you go into a gym and all the racks are full and I want to do bent over fucking rows. Okay, but I can't get a power rack to do it in. And honestly, yeah, I hate bending down and picking up off the floor. Maybe it's lazy, but there's always some preacher curl bench open with an easy curl bar. Cool. Now, wait a second. Easy grip. That's actually a little nicer on the wrists for underhand than a straight bar. Cool. 2 problems solved. 1, I've got a rack that's available when the other ones aren't. 2, it's nicer on my wrists. So I found myself doing this. I'm like, why don't I actually do this for an article? No one has done this before. It's a simple little thing. Poof, up goes an article on that. It was quick and easy to write. They published it. So it's just practical real world stuff that I've experienced as a coach or stuff I found that I've modified with clients. Gareth Sapstad, are you familiar with the Fitness Maverick? He blows up tons of stuff on T Nation. Gareth's stuff comes from the innovations he's figured out for his clients, challenges. He's the guy who innovated the single leg hip thrust with a landmine. So the landmine is on a piece of padding in the crux of your hip. And it was so brilliant that Brett Contreras, the glute guy, grabbed it and gave credit and started sharing it too. Right? But that was Gareth's idea. Maybe somewhere along the way, someone else actually thought of it as well, but Gareth's the guy who popularized that, right? Because it was something to, well, how the hell do I do this for this client, single leg? You know, how do I load them up? Oh, cool, here we go, right? And then it's like, wait a second, this actually works.
And it's funny you mentioned Gareth. He, I think after that I got that published, we got published on the same week. He was he followed straight back. We've been commenting and liking each other's stuff for ages. So it's funny how that does that. And T Nation's really cool for that. But I, like you said, need to get back into just, even if it's like you say, I know they do a lot of the quick tip type articles as well. We just literally give a quick tip. Maybe I just need to start firing out one of those every few weeks.
Totally. And, you know, Gareth is great for that. I mean, get him on here, talk to him, right? Pick his brain on this sort of stuff. And then my buddy Matthew Ibrahim was also been on there recently, and he's a prolific content creator, brilliant coach when it comes to innovative but practical stuff. And then Lee Boyce. Lee's been doing this forever, so he's good at that stuff too. You know, get these guys on here, talk to them. They're amazing guys.
I think I'll be able to get Gareth on, but maybe the other 2 guys, I could use your help. Maybe do the hookup.
Snap of the fingers done. Matthew, I know, will do it in a heartbeat, and Lee will always do this sort of stuff. So yeah, no, I'll connect you with both of those guys. Happy to.
I think Lee Boyce was probably one of the first people I followed on social media. He's very he's definitely not cut from the traditional cloth as far as social media is concerned. Super straight shooter.
Super straight shooter, nice guy, quite introverted. And this is one of these things, like talking about traveling in the fitness industry. So Lee is someone I've always liked. I've always loved his writing, great writer. So he was presenting at, I think it was the 3rd year I went to the Kansas City Fitness Summit. And I'd already talked with him, had him on the podcast. So I kind of met him through the virtual world. And when Dean Somerset and I started putting together our Canadian conference, we mostly had Canadian presenters. So Lee was tops on both of our lists. So we'd already arranged for him. But so I went down to Kansas City and met him in person. And we're just hanging out. Me and him and Brett Contreras are kind of standing in the back, you know, all the big tall guys. And, you know, all the people who are attending are kind of sitting in the chairs or whatever. We just sort of hung out on the side and watched everything. And Lee just right away is like, yo, man, give me your number, right? And like Lee and I text all the time. And that's sort of this surreal thing. It's like, you know, I'm texting and close friends with people who, you know, I followed and learned from and kind of really looked up to. So there's an important thing here too, for anyone listening. I mean, don't necessarily go out and seek the approval of the coaches who have been your mentors. I think it's a great opportunity if you can meet them and engage with them. Great. But they're also real people. And if you put your head down and work at the stuff you're passionate about, be it writing or podcasting or YouTube or, you know, some sort of like substantive long form content creation, because the social media stuff by itself isn't enough to really gain the respect and traction in the industry. It's got to be that can be the polish on a lot of other like higher quality stuff that you'll do, but you never know where you can end up with your fitness career. So don't set your bar low and fail to have the ambition to maybe write for a T Nation one day or for some other major publication. You know, maybe you get yourself on Men's Health magazine or who knows what else. Or maybe you'll be the one who starts a podcast that gains a whole bunch of traction. Next, you know, you have the industry's who's who as guests on there, right? So set your sights on that kind of stuff, and if that's what you want to do, work toward it, and then you will be surprised who you're rubbing shoulders with and interacting with authentically.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's funny you mentioned about Danny as well, though. I think what actually opened the door to T Nation is she started following me on social media, and it was so random because I was like, I don't have any idea how you'd ever come across me. No idea. It's the most random thing ever, but I knew who she was straight away. I was like, yeah, read her stuff, T Nation. We just got started chatting the DM. She's super nice, super, super nice. And super pleasant conversation. And then it was just, I was like, are you guys looking for people to contribute articles? She was like, yeah, I'd love to see what you got. And so, like you said, like if you just keep your head down, you have good intentions, you want to do good and offer good stuff, then, you know, things will present themselves when they're meant to.
Put yourself in the position to take advantage of those opportunities, but work bloody hard. And sorry, I do subscribe to the whole idea of work your damn ass off, right? But work hard to put yourself in those good positions.
Definitely. I mean, just like you're up recording a podcast at midnight, so there you go.
I enjoy this. I mean, I think you'd be foolish to say no to this sort of thing. You know, this is what my 6th guest appearance in about 8 weeks. There's sort of been a blast of them the later part of this year, but I think a lot of it has to do with just how much attention, you know, I've been getting on social media, right? And the social media is validated by the T Nation and the podcast and the other like long form stuff. But it's those social media connections that you started out talking about that have led to this and led to being on Tom McCormick's podcast, Breaking Muscle, and other cool stuff. Right, that hasn't been released yet, but you know that'll be out there eventually. So it's cool, and I enjoy it. So yeah, I had a late start tomorrow, so I thought, fuck it, you know, I can stay up. This is no problem at all. I get up for these sort of things.
Definitely, you can. We can make an exception every now and then, right?
Yeah.
So speaking of social media, I started following you not too long ago. I also noticed that you wrote into, I think it was actually Gareth that might have actually shared one of your things. That's probably what got me following you in the first place. And so I noticed that, or at least what it seemed, we spoke about this a bit off air, but it looked like you were targeting some of your work towards fellow coaches within the industry. We now know what kind of vehicle that's through and why. But can you elaborate a little bit more on the type of work that you've kind of been doing, or the type of writing and content you've been building to help coaches with expanding their reach and their confidence within the industry?
I'll preface it by saying this. I don't do business mentorship or anything along those lines for coaches, right? I actually like making fun of the scummy business coaches that are in your DM, right? That stuff I get a good chuckle out of. And while maybe at some point in the future there'll be some sort of, you know, info products, the way that, you know, Gareth, who knows, maybe I'll grow into that space where I'm developing educational resources for coaches. I have no plans to do it at this point. But the point is I'm not trying to sell things to trainers. And quite frankly, occasionally, sometimes, another trainer will hire me as their coach or online coach. But I'm also not targeting that. There are two things. One is I actually enjoy it. It's something I'm passionate about. It makes me better. Actually, there's 3 things. So there's that. And I like engaging with those trainers. 2, it's establishing an industry authority presence. So if you can establish yourself as an industry authority, someone who is an expert not on just fitness and nutrition. It started with kind of Facebook writing I did long before I was doing the other things. As someone who is teaching about success and a lot of things about the fitness industry, then the end user on your social media who happens to be an enthusiast or maybe is just a family or network connection of yours, client of yours, who might refer business to you. Well, you're not just the trainer that they know, you're the industry leader. And if you position yourself as the industry leader, who the hell do you think they're seeking out first when they're looking for a trainer or looking to refer someone, right? So there's that. So the interests and the passion I have for this align with that particular goal as well. So I think that's kind of where that comes from. And then the third thing was just the industry has been good to me. I've had a really bloody cool career. I love it. I love getting up every morning. And trust me, I hate getting up in the morning, but I love getting up to go and like train a client. And I want to give back, right? It's a genuine interest in giving back with nothing monetarily to gain from it because it's something I love to do. And if that means makes a big difference, some of the people that I've sent out voice messages to who've been following me, some of the trainers who've been sharing my stuff, like some of them have been bouncing back with tons of questions and they're excited and it means a lot to them. And I look at this going, man, like part of me kind of wishes I had some of this stuff when I was, when I was just starting out. And I figured out a lot on my own. I followed and read and absorbed a ton of stuff. But there's way more educational resources today than there was 10 years ago when I started.
Definitely. It's funny. One of the key drivers behind the mentorship that I'm wanting to launch recently, we spoke about off air, was exactly the point you just made. Is I remember saying this statement so many times. I wish when I first started out, or I wish when I was a couple of years in, that I had this, or I had access to this information, or I had access to this level of mentoring. And I feel like that's something that's still, there's a lot of room for that. There's a lot of coaches who want to be guided and assisted and helped, and they want to get their information from people like, listen, man, like you've been in the trenches for like 10 years doing the work, putting the hours in. I want to learn. And so I think, yeah, like you say, when it comes from a genuine place and you just want to give back, that's where I suppose where my intentions come from as well. And I think that's a great place for that type of stuff to come from, because then, like we talked about earlier, it's authentic and it's going to be received well by the people that are meant to receive it as well.
And there may come a day, like I said, where who knows, maybe I put together some sort of course or the classic ebook or whatever, but something that actually has some real substance to it because it's something I'm genuinely interested in. Well, I will have given, and again, going back to Gary Vaynerchuk with his jab, right hook. Well, there'll be about 3,000 or 4,000 jabs before I actually throw out a right hook. But when I do throw that hook out, what do you think is going to happen? The person who I've been, answering questions for a year, who I've been responding to their messages, greeting with voice messages, people who just keep sharing all my stuff. When I put out something that they can turn around and buy, and maybe it's something that's like, maybe it's a $25 book, right? They're going to be buying this stuff. And again, that's not one of my major agendas with all this, but it's something that I still don't know what I'll be doing, where I'll be growing into 2 to 5 years from now. I have no plan. I know I'll still be coaching clients full time. I love that stuff. I'll still be podcasting. I'll still be writing. But who knows what other kind of opportunities will materialize. If I continue to build a loyal audience of people who really engage with what I'm doing, that's going to help there. Like Jonathan Goodman of the Personal Trainer Development Center Online Trainer Academy, he asked me to, be part of his affiliate marketing for a promo for his OTA course. And I looked at the people who were also part of it. Sohee Lee, Eric Cressy, Dean Somerset, Megan Calloway, and everybody else on this thing had a much, much greater reach and audience and following I did. Anyway, so turns out that, when I promoted it through my audience, they had a lot to offer. And even though I turned around to John and I'd said, hey, I'm sort of surprised because a lot of these other people have this audience. And Jonathan said, he's like, well, I like your audience. It's really engaged. I like your following. So that's cool. And yeah, I think there's a value in that and having a really engaged audience.
Big time. It's not necessarily about having those 100,000, 500,000. It's having, like in your case, that 8,500. But people are like, yeah, I really like what this guy's got to say.
What the fuck are you going to do with 500,000 people? Jesus, you'll never sleep. You'll never get any other work done. You have to hire a team to respond to that. I talked to Jordan Side about this stuff. He's got 700,000 now, I think. And and Jordan is an amazing guy and he's very giving. But I totally know he gets overwhelmed with trying to interact and respond to that stuff.
Yeah, I can only imagine being in those people's shoes. Like it must just be, how would you switch off? Like, I don't know how you would switch off from the constant stimulus and interaction. It's crazy. I suppose you must have quite firm boundaries in place.
I think you have to develop them.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll get on to the final question before the quick fire round. The quick fire round is always fun as well. The questions that you have no idea are coming. And it's very funny. We're talking about Instagram. So you're very active on there and you've been putting a lot of time and effort into it. And I think that shows, given that you said your following grew from I think you said it was like 2,000 up to like 8,000 or something along those lines.
Under 3 at the start of the year. Yeah.
And so you went from that and, you're now at a point you're posting quite a wide range of content. I know you like your little Twitter quotes as well. Those seem to be doing really, really well. So all that stuff ranges from like nutrition, training, even I've seen you even write a bit about like food relationships, quite a lot of thought provoking stuff that, like you say, stuff you would come across if you'd spent any sort of time working with humans and seeing the struggles they come across and the challenges. So in your opinion, like which type of content should personal trainers be, I suppose, focusing their time and efforts on? And what's been most successful for you personally?
So I will contradict my earlier statement by saying, if you're a personal trainer, you should be creating content to the end user you're trying to work with. Now, I know we just talked about me writing to other fitness professionals, but at least starting out, write, find a voice for the people who will ultimately potentially be your clients that you want to help. There's a lot of those people out there. So there's a smaller community of personal trainers. But along the way, my following is also growing with enthusiasts and everyday people who love what I'm doing too. So it's not just those people. And more, I'm almost gravitating towards the practical nutrition stuff, but that the coaches can take versus the stuff that's directed at here's career success stuff. And what was the second part of the question again?
What's been most successful for you? Like what's been the thing that's really allowed you to kind of build your reach and audience this year?
In terms of being able to do it well, it goes back to still having the relationships, big accounts, because for whatever reason, Mike Israetel keeps sharing my stuff on his wall, not his story, but his wall. And so every time he does that, I get a big spike of followers. Jordan Syatt shared one of my posts, and I woke up with 400 new followers one day. So the relationships you develop with other people in the industry are going to help. I had fun with my buddy Barrett. He's a Calgary trainer who I've known for a while, and he's kind of head down with his business. So anyway, he recently has been, trying to create more stuff on his social media, and but he shares everything I do. He just loves it, shares it. And I saw him today, and he posted two things. He posted that he just reached 900 followers. And he was proud of that. And I was like, okay, cool. He just didn't have much of a following on his account. And he also shared something. I'm like, fuck, that's really goddamn good. And I'm very picky about what I share. I'm like, that is shareable. It wasn't like, hey, I'm going to do my buddy a favor. I'm like, I want to share that. So I was chatting with him, and he said that, I congratulated him on 900. He's like, yeah, I've gained 25 followers in the last 6 weeks. I'm like, all right, cool. Well, I'm going to get you 25 followers in one day. So I shared it, tagged it, wrote up a little thing saying this, and like, hey, guys, give him a follow. Check this out. Let's get him 25 followers today. And I think halfway through the day, he was up 32. So he's like, yeah, man, I definitely owe you a whiskey. So imagine how cool that felt for my buddy, who's been a great supporter, to see that tag and that share. And he put the time and effort into creating something really good. He's a brilliant guy. He's been doing this for a really long time. But going back to the whole, what works, if you're familiar with the idea of the hero's journey, so like learning about story, you should be bombarded with this crap now because it's showing up in more and more books. I got a new book called Wired for Story I'm reading. It's got a bit of that in there. But it's all about the underlying premise of humans seek familiar patterns. So you mentioned the Twitter posts. They get shared like crazy. They go wild. Why? Very familiar pattern to people. It's my job to create an idea that is so well crafted and thought provoking, words you used, that it makes people want to share it. It can't be so generic. It's like, oh, that's boring. But it can't be so out to lunch, just like, what the fuck is he talking about? But it's got to be like, oh my God, I wish I wrote that. That is such a good way to put that. I've seen that with my clients. And, all of a sudden you get a couple hundred shares on something that really pops. And if that gets shared all around, especially if a few of those big accounts you have a relationship with, then all of a sudden in come the followers. And so what was beginning of this year, I was excited if I got 10 new followers a day. Now I'm averaging, the last several weeks, it's been like 40 new followers a day. And that pace will carry me to 10,000 before Christmas, right? And then, if that pace keeps up, that'll be 25,000 by the end of next year. And I plan to post once a day. Consistency is important. Putting up at least one thing a day. This is old Jordan Syatt stuff when him and his, people close to him like Carter Good, they blew up their Instagrams, and now they all have 100,000 to several 100,000 followers. When infographics were the big thing, that's how Spencer Nadolsky blew up his. That's how Sohee Lee blew hers up early, and they're creating great information before everybody was doing the infographic thing. But why? The infographics were accessible. People liked them. They created really useful pieces of information, and once they became more common, they really took on a life of their own. Then they got kind of almost too ubiquitous. But yeah, it's got to be, creativity, consistency, and you got to package it up in something that's accessible. Like if a band comes out and writes a formulaic song. I mean, fuck, you know, if anyone here knows who Nickelback is, I think they're one of the biggest bands in the world. He's laughing. Good. They're a Canadian band.
Yeah.
And guess what? I have several Nickelback albums. I like some of their music. I find they've always got this one like fast metalish song I can lift heavy as hell to. It's actually some of my favorite stuff to lift to. And they've always got that party rock song, and they've got the kind of feel good ballad. It's all formula, because Chad Kroeger is a great formulaic songwriter. And as much as people want to hate on them, someone's buying the records, and a shit ton of them. So there's a formula to it. The Beatles stuff is very formulaic, and people are going to be like, what the fuck is he doing comparing the Beatles to Nickelback? But there's a lot of the popular artists right now, and it's become almost like a science of measuring how songs are constructed to see what would probably be popular. You know, Justin Bieber's work right down to, you know, old Rolling Stones music. So the stuff that's popular, understanding the way that human brains process and like and want to interact with and share and absorb and buy certain things will help you understand how to create social media. And if you want to get further into it, there's a shit ton of books on it, but you know, two good ones they're both orange, so they complement each other. They're Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath, and Contagious by Jonah Berger, Berger. Anyway, those are good books as a starting point if you're interested in learning about creating sticky stuff that people will want to share.
Very cool. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I've not got the social media following that you have, but what I have found is, I think it must have been about 3-4 months ago, I started getting into doing the Twitter posts, or the Twitter style posts. And they are literally, from looking at the insights, the most shared by a mile.
By a massive degree.
Yeah. And so it just shows, I think that Twitter posts are the modern day infographic.
Absolutely, they are. I thought the same thing. And then I was teasing John Goodman about this on a podcast I have with him, whereas he does like the notes by John. Yeah. So he's the notes thing on if you got an iPhone.
Yeah.
So it's an attempt to step aside away from the Twitter ones that are popular to create something new. Now, John actually does them well, but I find that most of the people who do them, they just haven't like cleaned it up, or it's not aesthetically pleasing, and it's like, okay, no, this doesn't work. And I don't think it caught on the same way the Twitter ones did, because I think people are trying to go, okay, well, this Twitter post trend will die. It'll get old. It'll get stale. Too many people will do it. Guess what? They still share like mad. You go follow a guy like Neil Strauss. I don't even know who the hell Neil Strauss is. God only knows. He could be a terrible human being for all I know. I think he's probably pretty cool. But he creates these just nice pieces of wisdom. He's not in the fitness industry. It's just greater philosophical stuff. And all he does is post these Twitter things, and they're like brilliant. So he's one of the few people in that space that I follow. If someone knows who the hell he is or what he does, I could Google that in a heartbeat, but he just creates some cool shit that I like reading.
Yeah, and that just shows that someone outside our industry, and that's probably another lesson for coaches to look at when it comes to creating content, is don't just stay within the echo chamber that is the fitness industry. You know, look a bit laterally and look kind of outside, see what other people are doing.
Be interesting, have interests outside of it. And this is, you guys should have all heard this before, but I mean, think about the stuff that you're passionate about, that you talk about with your clients on Monday morning, whether it's, you know, your version of football or ours, right? The soccer.
You can say soccer. You can say soccer.
Or, God, I mean, like, I love The Witcher, right? I've got some figurines up on the thing up above, or any of the other stuff that you're interested in. You know, if you're playing Call of Duty and you actually have clients who like that stuff, just don't be a bloody fitness robot. Have some interests outside of it. And yeah, read some stuff that isn't just geared towards making your career better. Although, trust me, work on your career. Seriously, it's going to be worth it in the end. But just know a little bit about outside of that. Be interesting.
Definitely some good advice all around, which I think segues us nicely to the final part of the podcast, and ever closer to you getting some sleep, which is also a good thing as well. So we'll fire into the quick fire round.
Sure, fire it away.
Ready to rock and roll? Good, man. What's your favorite meal out?
My favorite what?
Meal, like your favorite thing to have out, like say like a weekend meal or with friends or family.
A medium rare steak.
That's came up before. It's a popular one. What about the stuff on the side? Steak cut fries?
There's a restaurant here that does a crispy mashed potato and then just garden veggies is always good.
Solid choice. Bit of gravy? Gravy, no gravy?
Running joke for anyone who knows me. I don't think I've ever said this on air. I think gravy is disgusting. It looks terrible. I actually hate the stuff.
Fair enough. Fair enough. A good mushroom sauce is usually quite good as well, though. Depends where you go. Sweet or savory?
Sweet.
Good man. Good man. We're on the same side. What's your favorite exercise currently, if you had one?
I love a supported or Hatfield safety bar Bulgarian split squat.
I knew you were going to say that.
I love it. It's fun exercise. So I do have an article on T Nation about doing it, Hatfield style, holding the rack. I'm working on something for the supported variation. And you can go really heavy on this thing because you're adding stability to a single leg exercise. So there's some video on my Instagram of what I've been doing with that. And then people have been just like straight up, holy shit, when they see this. But it's, once you understand the mechanics of it, you try it, you can move some serious weight. But you also got to watch my range of motion. I've seen a bunch of people try to replicate it. And some are doing it legit, like Tony Gentilcore was doing it legit with 3 plates on one leg with his support leg still recovering because he tore his
cast, yeah.
one leg and then tagging me in this shit. And I'm just like, holy shit, Tony, that's incredible, right? Tony's tall, but I'm way bigger than Tony is, right? So I'm just like, oh Jesus, Tony's like almost keeping up with me. What the hell? And then, there's some other guys doing it. And then some of them are like, oh, you guys are cheating your range of motion. That's bullshit, right? You can't force range of motion you individually don't have, but don't load the hell out of a bar because you want to ego lift either, right? Like you got to be in control of the bloody weight. But I like this. If anybody's curious, what I mean is, so you're actually holding on to the rack, but holding on the way you do it, you really can't push with your hands if you're holding the safety spotter arms. You really are pushing through your leg, right? And your front leg is doing most of the work. And then, so my best, I think it's like 315 for 8 per leg. And then it's 365 for 4 reps on each leg, right? And that's just, and the safety bar is sitting on your shoulders. So you're not even holding the bar because you're holding the safety spotter. So someone watching this is going, sweet Jesus, hell no. But actually, it's a fantastic exercise if you set it up right. And it's a great way to, heavily load a single leg. So you're getting less axial loading on your spine. Now, when you get to that kind of weight, you're getting pretty heavy regardless. But then you don't have to max out your squat all the time. And, you keep your rep range in something where you're not like trashing your knees. And honestly, my knees and my body just feel great doing it. And yeah, it's fun to move that kind of weight for reps on this. And then, yeah, sure. Okay. Post up on social media. People are freaking out about it. It's like, okay, that feels kind of cool, right? Don't ego lift and get off plan. But at the same time, if you got something cool that you're strong at, it's kind of cool to show it off too.
Definitely. I think the thing is, there's 2 points to that. Like one, every exercise has a skill component you have to learn. So don't rush into it and think it's just about beating numbers because you still have to learn the skill. 2, I think a lot of people think stability is just kind of this. First of all, I think stability is hugely misunderstood, hugely. But secondly, like it's not evil to add stability to an exercise if the context is right? And that's all you've done in that situation is you've just made an exercise more stable to increase output because the goal of that exercise is to increase output and force production, right? So
totally. And you've added a little bit of stability to a single leg exercise, which dramatically increases your ability to exert force production. You're getting more training volume, heavier loading. The training effect off that is fantastic. It's, you see people doing single leg press. That's actually a pretty fucking smart concept. And this is not that different, although I still like this a lot more than single loading a leg press. If anything, there's also the whole, like, you can move some serious weight on a single leg on a leg press to the point where it actually gets kind of dangerous. That's where I draw the line.
I think as well, what I like about your variation of the split squat is that, it can be really tough to load that length and position of the quads with any sort of weight, but that gives you a great option for doing that. So I think it's a great variation.
Yeah, it's fantastic. If anybody listening, and I know you'll probably, ask me about my social media, or I think you probably put it in the notes anyway, but seriously, reach out to me on Instagram, because if you're on Facebook, fine, but if, reach out to me on Instagram. If you have any questions about it, I'll send you the link to the article directly and answer questions, because I like that sort of stuff.
Definitely. I'll definitely link it in the show notes for sure. Most loathed or hated exercise? Like if you wanted one exercise that you wish would just disappear, what would it be?
I really need to be cliche in this one, and I think burpees are just trash. I know there's such low hanging fruit, and I know the industry, they like to argue about it. And I think it's like, I don't know, Ben Bruno gets out on them, and Nick Tuminello, I think, defends them, and there's some sort of big blow up, but it's such a cliche, thing. But I just think in terms of like benefit to cost ratio, I think they're just a trash exercise on fatigue generation for starters, right? I think they just get thrown in when coaches are being too lazy to use something better, and clients just don't feel good doing them. Exercise should never be punishment, and exercise shouldn't be unpleasant. Yeah, tough training can be unpleasant, but you're throwing burpees at clients just because, well, hey, I don't want to think of anything else, and then they kind of hate them. I don't know many people who like burpees, and I don't know. It just there's so many fundamental problems with the idea of it. And it's a crappy exercise. It's combining a few things that, okay, do them separately. Do a really smart way to jump. Do push-ups. Have people getting up and moving and down on the ground. That stuff's good. But doing them all together in a quick and sloppy way, I just think there's a lot of better ways you can do it. But again, I don't want to riff on about burpees because again, it's such an automatic thing to shit on. It's like fucking with CrossFitters, right?
I think it's a very nuanced thing, and I agree with you. I think if you're a personal trainer, one to one giving clients burpees, I would almost class that as borderline negligent. For a number of reasons. I mean, apart from it being just lazy programming, bad stimulus to fatigue ratio, it's also just, if I think about, like you say, how well people can control each of the constituent parts of what's realistically quite a complex movement and explosive at many components of it as well. For me as well, just the load on the spine for most people when they freaking slump down into that horrible position at the bottom, it's just not worth it. Like if you're in a CrossFit class or, you've taught people how to do all those parts well and they can control everything super well, have at it as part of your conditioning. But if you don't know how to do a push-up, you don't know how to squat, and you don't know how to transfer load dynamically, forget about it. You're not even there. So I agree.
Ultimately, that's true of anything. You put an untrained group of people in a class setting and you get them doing bodyweight squats and their form is crap. Well, then that's negligent. Again, and teasing you about CrossFit, giving your background, but it's like, how many brilliant CrossFit coaches are there who actually instruct the Olympic lifting and the other components of it really well to the point where their people are, you're making faces, but
Not many.
that there's good people in there. There's not many good personal trainers. And I'm not the person who likes to shit on our industry. I want to uplift our industry. Anyone listening, I know is good and passionate. But yeah, we look around and we see the ones that aren't good. I don't fixate on that. And I try not to criticize them.
Yeah.
But this is my defense of CrossFit, right? I mean, my thing with CrossFit is I think CrossFitters have a shittier sense of humor about being teased than powerlifters do, right? Or bodybuilders. But my God, most of the bodybuilding coaches that are floating around out there are absolute trash human beings. They're awful, right? But there are good ones. Okay, we know there are good ones. But the bad ones are the ones who are pumping full of drugs for bikini shows and various other sort of thing. And they happen to also be the ones selling the drugs. Okay, I'm not going to riff on that whole tangent too much. Then you get powerlifting coaches who, they're giving their clients dangerous, programming to the point where, I mean, powerlifters, they're broken all the time. They're those fuckers are always hurt. Okay, so to make fun of CrossFit as being inherently more dangerous than anything else is completely ludicrous. But we know it has its flaws, right? So I like to always throw that in there too. And I don't like picking on the low-hanging fruit of our industry. But it is fun to fuck with CrossFitters because they damn well need to get a better sense of humor.
Very sensitive individuals. I think because I've always been like a coach who delivers mostly body comp stuff. Even when I was competing in CrossFit, my clients were mostly body composition. So I was always quite happy just sitting in a bit of a middle ground and just being kind of like, I can kind of see both sides here, and I can see that you're not very good at taking this, you're not very good at taking that. But I think the thing that I did find from, and it's funny you mentioned things like weightlifting, powerlifting, CrossFit, and only now I've kind of been more so focused on physique stuff, so I'm going to compete next year on stage, is just bad coaching is bad coaching and good coaching is good coaching. And there are good coaches that exist across the industry, but they're very few. And that's the case across all disciplines. I would say across all disciplines, the majority of coaching is really poor. That's not solely like isolated to CrossFit, it's everywhere. Every part of the industry.
Bad physical therapists, there's bad chiropractors, there's bad everything in every industry you've ever come across, and that's a reality of our world. So guess what? If you're listening to this, it means that you want to be great at what you're doing. Focus on what you're already doing. Keep working at it. Keep listening to great people like you, Ross, and work hard, because I want to see you guys all really successful. And and if you're interested in the kind of stuff that I've been talking about, yeah, fuck, come and hang out with me on social media. Follow me on Instagram. Message me. I'd love to hear from you guys.
Definitely, definitely. So we'll get into the final few questions. If you were stuck on a desert island, which 3 items would you take? Curveball. Boom.
A device that I could play Tool on music. And again, this is assuming a power supply. 3 items.
It's a big assumption.
Big assumption. I know. That's a tricky one. I mean, and items. I can't take my cat. Ozzy.
You could.
Okay.
Things. Let's say things. You could take your cat. Other people have taken both their dogs, and
he might not be thrilled about being, on the island, but I'd have to have him with me. And God, I don't know. I am at a loss here. I'm not going to say something stupid and cliche like my iPhone, although that could play my Tool music. And I don't know. I don't think I can pick one book to read. You know what? I don't have anything. I'm tired at this point in the night, so I'm going to whiff on the third one.
There we go. Most people were saying things like something to filter water. That was a good one. People were being very like survival-esque in their answers. When you're at this time of night, the survival stuff's out the window, I think.
You're on a desert island stranded, you're fucked anyway. So
pretty much.
Yeah, you're fucked.
Yeah, unless you're lucky and someone comes by and helps you out. We'll finish with these last 2 questions. Who's had the greatest impact on your career?
There isn't one person, but a short list of people that I find inspirational, educational, and I find that the professional example has been really instrumental in where I've been. And I'm going to miss people, but Dr. Mike Isertel is really key on the educational side. Dean Somerset for sure. Jordan Syatt is very heavily influenced my social media in particular. I find Luca Hocevar a really great inspiration for hard work and just a lot of really great qualities. Sohee Lee and Lane Norton have been huge, especially for nutrition for me. Tony Gentilcore is another one on the knowledge educational space and just how to go about your career as a humble, engaging, and awesome person. And quite frankly, I'm going to miss at least equally as many names who I think are just as deserving, but those people are really awesome.
Very cool. What's your favorite book right now? Because you love reading, right? So,
and again, I'm terrible at just picking out just one, but if people want to be really successful, here's 4 books that I think are really worth reading. Linchpin by Seth Godin, which will be great about your attitude towards, hard work. Deep Work by Cal Newport. That big, productive work. The Obstacle is Away by Ryan Holiday. I think it's a great philosophy about controlling your attitude and your actions in the face of things beyond your control. And then 4th one, Essentialism, Greg McKeown. And there's 2 things there. One is putting all your energy and effort into the things that matter most, narrowing that down, and being good at saying no, learning how to say no to the demands that people place on your time that aren't serving. It's not about being an asshole, but it's about recognizing the things that are not serving you and what's important to you, and not allowing those things to siphon off your time from the things that matter.
Solid recommendations. The first 3 I'd heard of, the last one I haven't, so that's a good one. So definitely I'll be sure to put all of that in the show notes for sure.
All really straightforward reads. They're worth it.
Brilliant. What's next for you?
I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing. I don't have any grand plan for it all. I'm going to continue to be engaged with my social media. I'm going to continue to write for the publications I do. Hopefully reach some, future publications I haven't written for yet. But most of all, continue to work really hard to coach my clients, make sure that side of my business is strong. We have a crazy year in front of us, so don't take anything for granted. Make sure you're taking care of that end of things. It creates a lot of room and space and the financial resources to dabble in other stuff. And, I'm just keeping my head down for a little while to take care of my work and my business. and spend time with a girlfriend.
Nice. Very good. And last but not least, who should we have next on the podcast?
Well, I already threw those names at you, and Matthew Ibrahim and Gareth and Lee Boyce. And I'm going to give you one more because you're really interested in technical movement and stuff like that. Dr. Sam Spinelli. Really, really
nice.
brilliant. Sam's got a big following, down to earth, unbelievably strong human for a 6'5" guy, and smart. So he's someone you definitely need to talk to, and I'll connect you to him if you don't have a direct link to him.
That'd be awesome. Much appreciated. A lot of solid guests to get on the podcast coming up. But back to you. Thanks so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. And where's the best place people can find you?
So again, I mentioned Instagram a lot. So follow me at Andrew Coates Fitness, and send me a message. We'll chat. We'll interact. I am on Facebook. I'm less active on there now, but all roads go through my Instagram. I will share links to my podcast. Anything that I write for a publication will go up on there. That is where to find me.
Awesome. And I did notice, I'll share in the show notes your Instagram handle. If you go to Andrew's Instagram bio, he's got a link tree there, and that will take you right to all the main stuff that he's doing at the moment. So I'll be sure to link that in the show notes.
And then 10,000 followers soon, you'll get swipe ups directly to stuff. That's what I want. I want that swipe up function.
I'll be honest with you. It's funny you say that. The only reason I'd ever want to get above 10,000 is just that. It's so handy. Be able to say, swipe up for article, swipe up for this.
Oh, absolutely.
10K is the dream. There we go. Andrew, once again, thanks so much. I'm going to let you get off for some sleep.
Thanks, Russell. I appreciate it. Great to chat with you.